What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of the ynggpodcast. Finally, some exciting hockey news. So, Tony DeAngelo, after being bought out by the Philadelphia Flyers, which marks the second time he has been bought out, the first time by the New York Rangers in 2021. The New York Rangers are no longer paying for Tony DeAngelo. That ended last year, but the Philadelphia Flyers are stuck paying his salary for the next couple of years. But after being bought out, he signs with the Carolina Hurricanes, which Philadelphia and Carolina had a deal in place to send Tony DeAngelo there, but it was nixed because there's somewhat of a rule that states that a player cannot be traded back to the same team within the same season or year. So since that has been gone and the year has passed, there was talks about, renewing discussions about the possibility of trading him to Carolina. That's not the case. He got bought out. Carolina waits a couple of days and they sign him to a $1.675 million contract for 1 year. Um, the Carolina Hurricanes are also rumored to go after Erik Karlsson, but it seems at this point, this kind of, you know, indicates that that's not going to happen anymore. What are your thoughts, Zach?
Well, I think it's a move that makes a lot of sense for Carolina. First, I'll talk about the hockey sense of the trade. They're getting a player who's purely an offensive defenseman, but who's been a very consistently productive offensive defenseman in the past 5 years. They bring him back after he ventured out. He played a year prior in Carolina where he produced over 50 points, and that was his career. You can see it right here in the 2021-2022 season, hit 51 points, his career total. Actually not. He had a year with the Rangers with 50, but he was very productive there. And I like the role that he's going back to Carolina to play, because with the Philadelphia Flyers, their decor was very thin, and he was asked to do a lot in all situations. Going back to Carolina, they have their Brett Pesce, they have their Slavin, who still hasn't been traded. They have Dmitry Orlov, who's coming in, Brent Burns, Brady Shea. So they have their decor who they can rely on to play the heavy top 4 minutes. And then you slot in a guy like Tony DeAngelo, who's essentially going to come in and they're going to ask him to play on the power play, but also he's going to get the easier situations 5-on-5. And we know that 5-on-5, he generates a lot of offense. Not too great in his own end, but because of the role he'll be playing, that liability will be minimized. So I think in the hockey sense of this trade, it makes a lot of sense for Carolina, and they add another player to their blue line. And with regards to Erik Karlsson, I think this probably takes them out of the sweepstakes, because with a Tony DeAngelo, now they have 8 defensemen signed, 6 on 1 year deal on one-way contract. So they're going to be staying in 6 defensemen that are going to be staying in the pros, and their cap space just keeps on going down. So I don't know if Erik Karlsson is gonna be the trade piece for Carolina. Maybe this move indicates that maybe a team like Pittsburgh or a team like Toronto are getting closer to signing an Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, and the rumor has been that Brett Pesce uh, asked to be traded. They were trying to find a trade partner for Pesce. He's being paid around $4 million for the upcoming season. Then he's a UFA, and there was also talks about Teuvo Teravainen, who's been very inconsistent, dealing with a lot of injuries the last couple of years. He's you know. Being paid $5.4 million for the upcoming season, then he's a UFA. If they could manage to move out both players in separate deals or in a deal where they acquire a guy like Erik Karlsson, that could potentially work. But at the end of the day, they still need to sign Sebastian Aho next season because after this year, he will be a UFA. And you know how the UFA market is. There's a lot of teams who are willing to throw a lot of money at you. And just looking at other players that are very key on this team, Martin Nikas, for example, he's going to be an RFA that they're going to have to sign. Um, Seth Jarvis, he's going to be an RFA they're going to have to sign. So, there's a lot of key players that they're going to have to resign. Brady Shea is another guy that they're going to have to resign. He's a UFA next season. So they need to be smart on how they handle the cap space, unless they're really thinking about going all in this season. They have been going very far in the playoffs these last couple of years, but they haven't gone to the Stanley Cup final in a very long time. So that is the end goal for them. They're a contending team right now. They've been a contending team for years now. They want to go all the way. And if they think that going all in this year and acquiring Erik Karlsson, even though they added guys like Dmitry Orlov through free agency and Tony DeAngelo, then that's going to be very exciting. They already have one of the best or the best D cores in the league. So, somehow they keep on adding. This is a team that's also added Michael Bunting during the offseason as well. They've been very, very active. But that's how the Carolina Hurricanes are every offseason or even at the trade deadline. They're always making moves to improve their team. But, just looking at Tony DeAngelo, I know you were alluding to him having a career year with the Carolina Hurricanes. And honestly, in my eyes, I do believe that was a better year for him than the New York Rangers because he had a lot to prove that year. He had 51 points in 64 games, so 10 goals and 41 assists. But look at his production in the playoffs, 10 points in um in 14 games. He was almost a point per game player. So obviously in my eyes, looking at it as a whole from playoffs and regular season, that was his career year, even though his best regular season totals were in New York. But at the end of the day, I do believe that yet again, this is another smart move by the Carolina Hurricanes. Slavin being one of the best two-way defensemen in the league. Same thing with Dmitry Orlov, Brady Shea, very underrated as well, and Brent Burns. He's still very productive and very dangerous for his age. And Brett Pesci, who's a very good defenseman, but I believe will be out on his way out from Carolina very shortly.
Yeah, and what I'll add to that is that I think it's more likely that they trade a Jacob Slavin now instead of trading and acquiring Erik Karlsson, because you mentioned their cap situation and how it's going to be tricky in the next 2 years with their RFAs. And if they bring in Erik Karlsson, they're bringing in somebody who's making $11.5 million on an annual basis. And this is assuming that no salary is retained in the maneuver. And you look at Sebastian Aho, who's making 8.5 right now, hitting unrestricted next year. So he's hitting unrestricted, and the market is going to be probably set over the 10 million a year mark, which would be what they would have to pay him. So you're going to sign him to that much, have Erik Karlsson making 11.5, and then have to worry about everybody else. In terms of their salary allocation, it wouldn't make the most amount of sense. And so I do think that the more likely scenario is that Jacob Slavin will be the one that's traded now, so they could retain their Sebastian Ahos, their Martin Nikas, and their unrestricted free agents hitting into at the end of next season.
I just don't see it happening in terms of Slavin. He's so underrated and he's so good at what he does. And he's the reason why the Carolina Hurricanes are so solid defensively. He's a pillar for them. So I just disagree with that in my opinion. But in terms of like a trade, like I was alluding to before, I really see guys like Tivo Teravainen being sent out and Pesci. Maybe they could look elsewhere to move some salary. But in terms of Tony DeAngelo, what can he bring to this team that you haven't mentioned already? Well, in once again, he's going to be a low risk, high reward player. He's very very talented offensively, even though he's not the best defensively. But when you have guys like Jacob Slavin who are so good defensively, you have guys like Dmitry Orlov and Brady Shea. Obviously, they're going to be cleaning up your mistakes defensively. And a guy like Tony DeAngelo is really there to add a lot more offense to a team like the Carolina Hurricanes. They get production from every single line, even on their defensive pairings as well. It's a very well-rounded team, probably one of the best well-rounded teams in the league. So once again, the Carolina Hurricanes find a way to add another great player. They bring back Tony DeAngelo once again. And, it seems like the organization really likes this player, despite, you trading him to the Philadelphia Flyers. Obviously, its salary cap nowadays is very tight. So obviously, you're going to have to part ways with players sometimes. But I don't really think they wanted to part ways with him. It just didn't work out in Philly. Tortorella benched him a couple of times, so he was a healthy scratch as well a couple of times too. So it just wasn't working out in Philly. Two I guess hotheads or stubborn people not getting along. Obviously. Resulted in him being bought out and signing with another team. But guys, we'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on this signing? Is it smart to bring Tony DeAngelo back, or do you think that it was better just to like let him go and sign elsewhere? What are you thinking about the Carolina Hurricanes moving forward? Are you still going to be able to acquire a guy like Erik Karlsson? Do you think a guy like Teuvo Teravainen or Brett Pesci could potentially be moved in a possible Eric Carlson deal, or do you see them being moved elsewhere to create some cap space to add on a guy like Eric Carlson? But at the end of the day, the team with the best assets will be able to add a guy like Eric Carlson, and a team with a lot of cap space will be able to add a guy like Eric Carlson. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.